Good evening and welcome to Kunsamphayil Chilling. We're really happy to have you with us tonight. And we have a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon. The title is Hold Pure View of All the Buddha's Paths. So this was taught in 1992. And we'll begin.
So today, I would like to talk to the adults about the different perspectives that one has on the paths of Buddhism, because the idea of Buddhism being just one singular path without any diversity actually is erroneous. That is not true. The Buddha was very skillful when he walked on the earth, extremely so. And there is one example of his teaching and an indication of his realization, being that it was said that he could talk to a group of people, of sentient beings, and in fact that when he was talking to them, that actually animals would come and listen, and it is said that non-physical beings would come and listen as well. And that the people that gathered in front of him, or the sentient beings that gathered in front of him, might all speak different languages, but that his skill was such that whatever language they spoke in, that would be the language that they heard the teaching in. And so some scholars actually wonder if that was true, if that was a literal truth, or if it was more symbolic. Was it true that the Buddha could actually speak in such a way as to transmit teachings in different languages under different conditions for the ears of different sentient beings? Or was it so that he spoke to them at their level and somehow was able to transmit information to them in such a way that they could understand, even though there were many different levels of understanding in the audience? I tend to take the truth literally, because the Buddha was not an ordinary man. He wasn't even at the level of a great bodhisattva, an awakening being. He was at the level of Buddhahood, and Buddhahood is something that each one of us carries within, and when it's realized in the world, the potency of that is stupendous. There's nothing like it. We cannot understand the potency of Buddhahood with our ordinary minds. We could not understand how one could speak in several different languages at once with our ordinary minds, but neither could we understand the potency of Buddhahood with our ordinary minds. So in my mind, I think that it must be that he was actually able to do that, actually able to transmit the knowledge in different languages, but that it also meant that his skill was such that those that gathered around him could at their level truly understand the teaching. My own personal experience with Dharma has been that there are many different levels of Dharma and many different ways to understand Dharma. There are many different points of view, and they are actually categorized in different schools of thinking. But even within those schools of thinking, there are many different methods that one could apply, many different levels of view that one could attain. Generally speaking, there is the Theravadan point of view, which it can also be called the Hinayana point of view. And in that point of view, one should truly renounce cyclic existence, having viewed that cyclic existence is faulted, similar to what I tried to explain to the children about the impermanence of all things that bring pleasure, and that all things that are within cyclic existence have a good side and a bad side, and that a cyclic existence is actually filled with different forms of suffering, and that everything within cyclic existence cannot last. So understanding the faults of cyclic existence, and in fact that even we who feel ourselves to be the main focal point of our own experience will eventually die and eventually be reborn, and that we don't have much control over where we will be reborn. So all of these things being true, the Theravadan point of view teaches us that we should renounce cyclic existence, that we should abandon desire, that we should abandon ego clinging, that we should actually abandon self, and in that way come to be released from cyclic existence. That view carries into all of the Buddhist teachings. There is no element of the Buddhist teachings that does not have that particular view. The Mahayana point of view considers that one should abandon self, but includes the idea that all sentient beings are inherently equal, that we all have the Buddha nature, and that because we all have the Buddha nature, that we are inherently equal. That being the case, we are also inherently inseparable, and that all sentient beings, due to the fact that we have incarnated many times, have been related to us in some way. We have relationship with all sentient beings. In some sense, they have all been our friends or our mothers. I think we actually are taught that they have all been our kind mothers. That if you can lay eyes on any sentient being, then they have at some point been your own kind mother that has caused you to be reborn under these conditions that are now auspicious. So we think of all sentient beings as our parents. We think of them as motherly sentient beings. That is actually the coined phrase, motherly sentient beings. And that being the case, we treasure all sentient beings and try to be very kind to them. We try to pay back to them the kindness that they in the past have repaid, have given to us by being our mothers. In a deeper sense, we think that all sentient beings are inherently the Buddha, that they are inseparable from us, that my weight, since I am inherently Buddha nature as well, must be the same as your weight, since you are inherently Buddha nature. But there is no separation between us. I am not more important than you, no matter what my station is. If I were a queen, or if I were the highest teacher that there could possibly be, or if I were the empress of the world, or a goddess, or something like that, then my weight from the point of view of importance would not be more than yours. I would not be more significant than you, that you would be the same as me. And looking at all sentient beings, obviously there are more of you than there are of me. In this room alone, you must be more important than me, simply because we are the same, and there are more of you than there are of me. So I must take you, your enlightenment, your realization, as being more important. I have to hold you more strongly and with more love, with more dedication than I do myself, simply because there are more of you and you are the same as me. We examine the point of view of all sentient beings in the same way that in the Theravadan point of view we examined the faults of cyclic existence. In the Mahayana point of view, we see that all sentient beings want to be happy. There is no sentient being, no matter what their station, that does not wish to be happy. Every sentient being does. Certainly all humans do, even though they seem to be confused in their efforts. Isn't that true? Some sentient beings seem to try to be happy in very strange ways, like in human being realm we have odd things like murderers, horrible things, like people that really inflict pain on others. We have those that steal. We have those that break, that destroy things, that seem not to understand how not to destroy things. Sentient beings that make terrible mistakes, the sentient beings that seem to want to be, they seem to be neurotic in such a way as to cling to their unhappiness. And it seems as though they don't want to be happy, but in fact they do. But their understanding is limited, you see, and they're trying to be happy in a strange way, a way that is not visible to us. All sentient beings, in fact, wish to be happy. All animals wish to be happy, but their understanding is so limited they do not understand how to be happy. An oxen that pulls a big cart all day long and works literally as a slave, even though with his great strength he could easily break away from that cart. He could easily destroy anyone that tries to imprison him. that very ox still wishes to be happy, even though it doesn't seem that he wishes to be happy. It seems as though he's just resigned. But the ox is trying to be happy by not resisting. He doesn't know what else to do. He avoids the confrontation with those that imprison him and just simply pulls the cart in a horrible way all day long. And it's like that with our dogs. Our dogs, for instance, they jump up on us trying to get us to pet them and love them, and they have muddy feet and we knock them down, and they jump back up and we knock them down, and you think, this dog is really stupid. It wants me to hit him. It wants me to knock him down. It's really stupid, but in fact that's not true. It's true that the dog is a little stupid, but it's not true that the dog does want to be hit. The dog wants to be loved, and it doesn't understand that it has big muddy feet and that you don't want it to jump up. So animals wish to be happy. All non-physical beings wish to be happy, although we've never seen too many non-physical beings. They all have particular characteristics. And the Buddha teaches us that some of them are filled with desire and don't know how to attain that desire. Some of them are filled with negative emotions. Some of them are filled with positive emotions. All of them wish to be happy. And so seeing that all sentient beings are equal and that they wish to be happy, we dedicate our lives to being of benefit to sentient beings. In this and every future life, we wish to bring benefit, simply to alleviate the suffering and to bring happiness to all of those who are more than us, many more than us, and who wish to be happy. Now, in the Vajrayana point of view, the understanding or the precept increases. It does not change. We still understand the faults of cyclic existence. We still wish to renounce cyclic existence by understanding its faults. We still wish to adapt the compassionate point of view. We still wish to attain compassion for all sentient beings, and we wish to work endlessly for the benefit of all sentient beings. That is the main precept, really, also in the Vajrayana point of view. But in the Vajrayana point of view, there is an increase. There is an added dimension. And the added dimension is called pure view. Now, pure view is not understood. And many people think that the Vajrayana path is a superior path to the other paths that the Buddha has taught, which in fact I believe it is also. But they believe that to be true for a negative reason, for an ignorant reason. They think that the Vajrayana point of view is easier. By practicing pure view, it is easier. That is not true. It is not an easier path. It is a more difficult path. Much more difficult. And I'll explain why in just a moment. They think that the Vajrayana point of view is more fun. Well, if it's practiced correctly, it is not more fun. It is the same, exactly. In the Vajrayana point of view, they think there is more freedom. In fact, that is not true. There is not more freedom in the Vajrayana view unless you are practicing it badly. If you are practicing it well, there is not more freedom. It is the same. Because in the Vajrayana point of view, one can practice just as effectively as a monk or nun as you would as a layperson, and just as effectively as a layperson as you would as a monk or nun. But I must take issue with that in this regard, that the pitfall, and this is what makes the Vajrayana point of view very difficult, is that most people don't really understand what they need. There are some people that cannot practice unless they take ordination, and they are fooling themselves if they feel that they are practicing without ordination. They are falling into a pit. They do not understand. When one takes ordination, one has many vows that one must fulfill, and they're very hard and fast. And they're not compromisable. One cannot fool around with them. There are certain things that you cannot do, and certain things that you must do. If you fool yourself and think that you can accomplish liberation without these things, then you've made a mistake. a terrible mistake that cannot be rectified in any other way other than becoming more honest and really looking at your own habits. Some people cannot abandon lust. They simply cannot. They cannot abandon desire. It hooks them every time. In their minds, it's like Velcro. When they see desire, when they register desire, when they see things in the world that stimulate them, it's like Velcro. And the Buddha teaches us that all of our suffering is due to desire. So we cannot abandon suffering unless we abandon desire. And so some people are fooling themselves unless they become ordained. And as an ordained person, there are some things you cannot do. So you must abandon desire, otherwise you'll go crazy. You'll just go crazy. As a monk or a nun, you must be celibate. Therefore, you are a fool, an absolute crazy person if you do not abandon lust. You must. Or by the end of your life, you'll be in a straitjacket. You'll be crazy. So you must do it. It's like cold turkey. So that is only one thing. Of course, there are many different accomplishments that must be made and are made better as a monk or a nun. There are some people that can practice pure view. And in practicing pure view, they also abandon desire. They also abandon lust. If I told you how rare that was, you would cry. Believe me, you would cry. That is so rare. It is hardly ever done. Hardly ever done. In Vajrayana, one can adopt a different perspective. In Vajrayana, one actually realizes the nature, one meditates very, very in a singular way, in an uncompromising way, on the nature of all sentient beings. And meditating on their nature, one can see that all sentient beings are the very Lord, the very Buddha. The difficulty is that people think they have that. They walk around affirming it, kind of in a New Age way. I'm affirming that all sentient beings are the Buddha. And they make all these little affirmations, They sort of write them down and repeat them over and over again. They say, "You are the Buddha. I look into your eyes and I see that you are the Buddha. Yes, you are the Buddha. I am having a meaningful experience thinking that you are the Buddha." But in fact, there's no realization there. One does not understand anything under those conditions, because one will still act as though that were a man or a woman. The habit is still there. But if one were sincerely practicing Vajrayana, one would actually be practicing at the Dzogchen level, at the level of completion. And one would see through accomplishment the nature of each and every sentient being and understand that in their nature they are the very Lord. And so the way that one would act uncompromisingly toward every sentient being is to cause their enlightenment, to bring that seed of Buddhahood into fruition in an uncompromising way. Even if one were to have sex with them, one would do that in order to bring out their enlightenment, and it would never be for any other reason. There would never be anything else in mind. Even if one were to allow the feeling of grasping or desire as regards another person to come into play, that grasping or desire would only be a tool and would be seen in its empty nature and not clung to. It would be the same as any other piece of phenomena. In this case, to use a gross example, shit would be the same as chocolate. The same. Without any distinction. So in this way, desire is there, yes, but desire is the same as non-desire. Chocolate is the same as shit. Grasping is the same as non-grasping. There's no hook there, there's no Velcro. One is practicing pure view. The problem with that is that almost no one can do it. The problem with that is that one has to have accomplishment in order to practice like that, in order to really do that. And if there isn't much accomplishment and you've convinced yourself that you can get away with it, then you're in trouble. You're a fool. I don't mean that in an unkind way. I mean that you have to take yourself in hand, look at yourself in the mirror and say, "You're a fool!" Because something is not happening right. So, yes, there's lots of room in the Vajrayana point of view, but it's much trickier, much easier to run aground, run amok. Very difficult path, quite difficult. In the Vajrayana point of view, everything is understood, hopefully, in its inherent nature. All sentient beings are seen in their nature. And so one must react toward other sentient beings. And I use that word with caution because I mean it differently than we would ordinarily mean react. Mostly we think of react with clinging. And I'm not talking in that way. I'm not speaking in that way. But we think of other sentient beings, we react toward other sentient beings with a sense of equanimity. That one would do for one sentient being what one would do for another sentient being, according to their potential. And that is the difference. If one were to really practice pure view in the Vajrayana tradition, if one were really to accomplish the Dzogchen view, let's say one were a teacher, one would react toward each student differently, but it would be according to their potential, not according to how much one liked them or had desire for them or anything like that. You see the difference? It would be according to their potential. And so if one were to take one student and really do a lot with them, take them very close, that would be because of their potential, because of how much room there was within that continuum, that space and time, to ripen the seed of Buddhahood. And if one were to keep another student at a distance, it would be because at that point of time there wasn't much to do. Not much could be done. Doesn't mean that more can't be done later. It means that right now there isn't much to be done. It's according to that pure view. And that's how one should practice. Can you see how difficult that would be? Can you see how very difficult that would be? Impossible for an ordinary sentient being, really. Something to aspire to, certainly, but just about impossible. Very difficult. Because how could we find a way not to react with desire? How could we engage in a relationship? How could we engage in any kind of intercourse, any kind of social, mental, intellectual, emotional, or physical intercourse with any other human being without there being something that connects, something that is a hook, something that arouses passion of some sort, or the opposite of passion, some sort of rejection or repulsion? How would that happen? Ordinarily, sentient beings cannot do that. Yet in the Dzogchen view, in the Vajrayana point of view, that is the requirement. It's so difficult. Everything must be equal. Everything is equal. And it's not that you're a good person and you're practicing in that way that everything must be equal. It's not like you should pin a medal on yourself and you think, oh, I'm not attached, so everything's going to be equal and I'm going to act like it. It's not like that. It's because there is some accomplishment, hopefully, and everything is equal. It is all equal. And within that dance, within that composition, that one would engage in practicing in that regard. All that one does, every kind of activity that one would do, would be in order to accomplish that pure view. That is to say, would be only in order to bring forth the accomplishment of the realization of any person that one engages in activity with, the accomplishment of their awakening to their Buddhahood. So that if one were to move very fast, that would be in order to accomplish, because it was time to move fast. If one were to move very slow, that would be in order to accomplish, because it was time to move slow. If one were to dance, one would dance in order to accomplish, because it was time to dance. If one were to push away, one would push away because it was time to push away, in order to cause accomplishment. It is always that case. Without missing, within a heartbeat, without missing a beat. It must be that way. Based on the understanding that all sentient beings are equal, that they wish to be happy, that cyclic existence is faulted, and that in their nature they are the same. They are the very Lord, the Buddha. That is the view. One views all men as potent gods, Buddhas in their nature. One views all women as pure and perfect, potent goddesses, Buddhas in their very nature. In that way, if you saw all women as the Mother Tara, all women as Tara, the mother of all the Buddhas, the highest primordial wisdom, if you saw all men as Guru Rinpoche or Amitabha Buddha, how could you feel desire for them? How could you have desire? There is no desire. But there is equanimity, seeing them as perfect and the same. And there is a longing to call them forth, to pull them into an awakening. And that longing may display itself in many different forms, under many different conditions. Doesn't that sound difficult? Doesn't that sound like a very hard way to practice? It's absolutely the hardest way to practice. An ordinary sentient being really cannot do that. We don't have that. What generally happens to ordinary sentient beings on the Vajrayana path is that they kid themselves. They think, oh, I can practice non-attachment as a lay person, and I'll just have lots of different relationships, and I'll just think of them as enlightened activity, and I'll think of all sentient beings as being the Buddha, and blah, 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 yada, yada. And basically what you're doing there is, excuse my language, but spiritual masturbation. Because that isn't what's happening at all. What's happening is that if an ordinary sentient being tries to think like that, it's just thinking. And it's the most superficial level. And what's really happening is that you're fooling yourself and you're doing something that's similar to stretching a rubber band. What you have is strong habitual tendency toward desire, towards ego clinging. And that habitual tendency has been reinforced since time out of mind. It's a hopeless situation in some ways, it seems to be, that cannot be resolved through just thinking. And since that situation has been practiced and habitual since time out of mind, eventually that rubber band will stretch back, will come back to its normal shape. The moment you let go, and you will let go, because it is your habitual tendency to do so. And no one can keep stretched like that all the time. Have you ever tried to think positive and make affirmation all day long? You can't do it. You'll let your guard down eventually. Hopefully you're smart enough to see when you do it, but some people aren't even smart enough to do that. They think that basically they're getting by. But it isn't true. And if you stretch out and bounce back enough times, eventually you become sad. And you dry up. You become disillusioned. And you feel kind of hopeless. And then you stop practicing and you make up an excuse like, this isn't really so important. I'll be fine. And that bright flame that was in your heart at some point that made you want to accomplish, that was your great hope, that was your youthful burning flame, that thing that kept you alive. At some point it just kind of goes cold and you lose something. And it's because we've given up. So to practice the view is very difficult, and I'm not saying that you should not try, that you should not practice the Vajrayana point of view. What I'm trying to do is kind of bring out some information and maybe cause a shock that will cause us to really take account of ourselves and how we are practicing. You cannot practice the Vajrayana point of view without true renunciation. You cannot practice the Vajrayana view without true compassion. You cannot practice the Vajrayana view without leaving the world. You cannot. And just the same as the monks and nuns, you must leave the world. You cannot have one foot in and one foot out. It isn't possible. You will not accomplish the view. And once having abandoned desire, for instance, if I think about a good example, I guess, would be celibacy, since it's something that people really are quite involved with. The issue of sexuality or non-sexuality. It seems to be very central in our thinking. Say we were to abandon sexuality and become celibate. As monks and nuns, can you tell me, does it then become a dead issue? Never, right? It never becomes a dead issue. So it's not like the moment you stop, it's gone. What remains is a habit, isn't it? Isn't it a strong habit? Doesn't it remain there as an issue? Don't you? Do you stop thinking of yourself as a man or a woman the moment you become celibate? Those issues of gender identification, aren't they still there? Very much so, aren't they? And those issues of responding to things that you see that are exciting in some way or stimulating in some way, aren't they still an issue? Very much so, aren't they? Of course they are. So these aren't dead issues. They are definitely happening still. But the enforcement of not being able to engage in sexual activity gives you the support of never holding out hope. Isn't that true? If you think that you're always going to be a monk or a nun, then you don't say, well, hopefully in the future I'll get satisfied. You never say that. But so the habit becomes, over time, less and less and less. It does become less and less and less over time. But if as a monk or nun you're not sure whether you can remain as a monk or nun, then it's not very helpful. Because if you're not sure, there's hope inside. You hold out hope. And of course, then that desire will not become less and less. Like a smart person, it hangs out in your head, or like a big dog, I should say. It hangs out on your head, jumping up on your lap all the time. thinking it's going to get petted eventually. Even if it's being pushed aside now, it's going to get petted eventually. Isn't that true? Yeah. So you have to stop holding out hope. Now, how would you practice as a layperson? Well, I'll tell you how I would practice as a layperson. I stop holding out hope also, but it's in a different way. I do not hope that such a relationship as that would ever bring me happiness. I do not hope for that. I never ask for happiness, and I don't hold out hope for it. And I do not hold out hope that any relationship such as that, such as a relationship that, is a sexual relationship, I do not have it in my mind that that will bring any satisfaction. I do not hold it in my mind that it's an answer. I do not hold it in my mind that it is permanent. I do not hold it in my mind that there's any hope. The only thing I know there's any hope about, for sure, is the awakening of the Buddha nature in all samsaric beings. That I hold out hope about. Because I must. Interestingly, in the Buddhist teaching is very complicated. There are many different levels that one might understand it at. In one level of the Buddha's understanding, generally all samsaric beings have within them the Buddha seed. They all have the Buddha seed, without exception. Dogs, cats, alligators, human beings, non-physical beings, insects, everybody equally has the Buddha seed. All samsaric beings equally, without exception. Sounds like I've said that a lot of times, right? But some people don't quite get that. But all sentient beings do. Therefore, they have within them the potential to attain Buddhahood. All sentient beings equally. Animals, people, non-physical beings, anything that is a sentient being can attain Buddhahood and will eventually attain Buddhahood simply by virtue of the fact that they have within them the Buddha seed, and that Buddha seed must be actualized. But actually the Buddha teaches that not all sentient beings have the auspicious connection. That is the thought that scares me more than anything, more than any loss of anything that I might cling to. That thought scares me. That not all samsaric beings have the auspicious connection. That there are some samsaric beings that are so isolated that they might be in some individual kind of continuum, so very isolated, or so very separate, or so far away in some way that we cannot understand, that while they have the inherent Buddha nature, they might not have the connection with some sentient being who later becomes a Buddha or a Bodhisattva who can lead them out of samsara. And it's always an interdependently arising thing. It's always a catalyst that leads one out of samsara. One does not fall out of samsara or do so by chance. One has to work very hard to get out of samsara, and one requires the help of an elder brother or sister, an awakening being or a Buddha who can bring about the auspicious connection. Specifically, I was told by a teacher one time that I may not have connection with all sentient beings, and therefore I may not be able to liberate them. Not that the capacity may not be there, but that the connection may not be there. Well, this was taught by the Buddha apparently, but this thought I cannot accept. I can't deal with that. I cannot cope with that thought. That is the thought I cannot cope with. I could lose anything. I could lose anything that I am connected to or attached to in any way. I can leave cyclic existence. That's easy. I can leave the party. I can renounce. To me, that seems easier. Easier by far than to think that there is some samsaric being with whom I do not have a connection. So I don't accept that, even though probably I'll end up in Vajra hell for not accepting the Buddha's teaching. I do not accept that. I cannot hear that. That does not go in my ears. Doesn't go very far anyway. That's the thought that scares me the most. So I think that the best thing to do is to work very hard to make sure that all sentient beings that I do have strong connections with achieve realization as quickly as possible, because they have connections with those that I don't have connections with. And so on and so forth in a ripple effect until the 6 realms of cyclic existence are completely empty. My commitment and my prayer is that I will be the last to leave. I wish to be the last to leave. I've prayed that for as long as I can remember, and I continue to pray that. And it's not because I'm such a nice guy that I'm making this nice guy prayer. It's because that's the only way I can be sure that all those who are the same as me, like me, and who are many more than me, will get out, as if I can hang back in cyclic existence and check all the dark diddy corners and make sure that there's nobody left. So that's what I hope for. Now that really is like the view that we should practice. We should practice the Vajrayana view in that regard, that when one sees sentient beings, one does not see some sort of interactive phenomena where one can achieve gratification. And that's how we see each other, you see. We see each other as objects by which we can achieve some kind of gratification. We see each other as happy places, or we see each other as means by which we can gain some pleasure or some accomplishment. And all phenomena that we view in cyclic existence, we view according to what we want, and it hooks us, and we remain in a clinging state. But in fact, one should practice this pure view. How can one practice such a view? Okay, in order to understand how one can practice such a view, one must understand the basis for not being able to practice. If I can practice that view a little bit, and you cannot, let's just say that we're true. If I can practice this a little bit and you cannot, why is that? Is it because I'm superior to you? Is it because you are lower than me? No. You are not lower than me. You have never been lower than me, and you are not lower than me now. You are the same as me. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be in this position. If I thought you were lesser or unequipped, if you were not the Buddha in your nature, I wouldn't try anymore. You are not less than me. The difference is that if you are unable to practice that view, it is because, and simply this, it is not your habit to do so. Simply that. It is not your habit to do so. Always when you looked at samsara, when you looked at cyclic existence, you reacted with attachment, repulsion, or neutrality. And the neutrality is actually not a pure spaciousness. It is after having examined and actually felt attraction and repulsion. It's through a pendulum swing kind of thing, and you end up in the middle. It's like, but it's not really spaciousness, you see? So the habit is to react toward everything with attraction, repulsion, or neutrality. And the reason why one does that automatically is because of the assumption of self-nature as being inherently real. I feel, I taste, I am. I know, I sense, I want, I don't want. Always that. And all things in samsara register in that way. It is our habit. And that habit is long-standing. It's not simply from the beginning of this lifetime. Since time out of mind, it is our habit. And so through that habitual tendency, we have always achieved rebirth. And that rebirth has always been achieved according to our level of ego clinging and according to the way that that has displayed just that. So it is our habit. If one were to practice pure view, one would have to first practice as the Theravada view practices. One would have to practice total renunciation, develop the habit of total renunciation. One would have to practice really viewing the faults of cyclic existence and totally renouncing it. Then one would have to practice absolute compassion. One would have to practice, if one were to practice renunciation, one would have to practice complete abstinence from ego clinging, meditation on emptiness. And then in going over to the Mahayana point of view, one would also have to practice pure compassion. So emptiness, renunciation, compassion, compassionate activity, all these things would really have to be accomplished. One would have to understand. One would have to practice the equality of all that lives. One would have to practice equanimity. Accomplish all those basics. Yes, they are basics, but you never stop needing to accomplish them because they are the very foundation of view. Without them, there is no view. It's just stupid mental thinking. There is no view without those basics. Not other basics, those basics. In order to practice the view, one must renounce cyclic existence. One must leave, abandon cyclic existence. Then one can begin to accomplish the habit of the view, which is to view all sentient beings as essentially the same. There is no love, no hate, no attachment, no wanting, no wanting. All sentient beings are in their nature the Buddha. There is only equanimity. They are the same. And one acts toward each one of them free of attachment, only according to their capacity. According to their capacity, period. And whatever one does with each one of them is in order to bring forth their greatest capacity, to ripen that capacity. If one requires that they love, it is to bring forth their capacity, not to be loved. If one requires that they are generous, it isn't to get what they can give you. It's in order to bring out their generosity. If one requires that they go away, it isn't because one doesn't send them away out of not wanting. It is because one requires that they accomplish something in another place. It's always like that, without exception and without flaw. And one begins to practice only after practicing total renunciation, abandoning cyclic existence, seeing its faults and abandoning it. Meditation on emptiness so that one does not cling to one's ego, because it simply doesn't matter, since it simply doesn't exist as we understand it. And then one practices pure compassion in the sense of equanimity. Not being a nice guy or a nice girl, but compassion, understanding that all sentient beings are equal. That it is illogical to love one more than another, or to love yourself more than any. It is illogical. And if one practices that view correctly, no matter what one does, or how one looks, or what activity one engages in, it is clear that one's very life is a vehicle, or rather a testimony, by which one can understand non-attachment. In short, all samsara runs through one's fingers like water through one's hands. Nothing to hold on with, nothing to hold. Having, not having, loving, not loving, being, not being, feeling, not feeling, shit and all the same. All phenomenal existence. And they're all the same because there is no self to put value on them, no ego clinging. The view is that one understands one's nature to be inherently empty of self-nature and understands that nature to be the very Buddha. Omnipresent, imperturbable, omniscient, and compassionate. And so there's nothing else to do but to engage in the kind of activity that will empty the 6 realms of cyclic existence.
Thank you so much for joining with us today and sharing the teaching, and we hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. So I hope that was true for you also as well. We do show these teachings in addition to Wednesdays at 7:30 on YouTube, also on Sundays at 11 a.m. And that's unless there's a practice going on at that same time. The teachings are pre-recorded though, and they are available on YouTube all the time, so you can go there and check them out. In addition, online offerings, we have Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. We have a meditation done by one of our Anis, and you're welcome to join in on YouTube again, or in person, because the temple is open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. And we welcome you there to the prayer room to come and meditate or just experience the energy, whatever it is you'd like to do. We have been open outside for the whole pandemic. We're now open both inside and outside. So we hope you come and take advantage, and also come and visit the animals, and come and visit all the stupas and the statues, and just the wonderful energy, and the garden, and all the places that if you wanted to help out and help feed people, you could do that. Jetsunma is strongly into feeding those in need and providing clothing and necessities for those who need them. And we do this all around the world. But primarily right here in our county, where there is a lot more people in need than we thought. So come join us, come find out what we're up to. I'll go back to what our practices are. I'm a little scattered. We do Medicine Buddha for You on Facebook every evening at 7 p.m. And it's a short practice in English, and a wonderful place to put questions or put people's names in there who you think would benefit from the practice of Medicine Buddha. We also generate merit for all of these activities every day with a soak, a food offering ceremony. Now we're doing, as the vehicle for that, we're using the deity Chimi Soktik, who is has to do with long life and gathering together and stabilizing all of the different elements in nature. So join us for that if you wish. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday at 5:30, Saturday at 5, and I'm sorry, Thursday at 5, Saturdays at noon, and all of that is the Chime Soktik, and you can go on Zoom for those, and if you go on the calendar on tara.org, which is there in the chat, the calendar you can find, and click on the event, and it will come up and show you where it is, what if there's any codes you need to get into it, and a link to download the practice involved. So we welcome you for all of that. Sundays we've been doing the Rigzen Dupa, which is a practice based on Guru Rinpoche at the Guru Rinpoche statue, and we invite you to come and join us live for that, or on Facebook, which appears to be about the only place we can get when we can. So we're happy to share it there. We also do a drum circle Sundays at 4 for slightly different take on helping to benefit the planet, and the drumming involves the Tara mantra and Tara mantra and the Chinrezi mantra. Those two mantras and the drumming helps to engage the elements and the energies, and we hope will bring rain and help balance out the drought situations around the world. So anyway, lots of activities. You can find out about that on tara.org. If you want to make an offering to Jetsunma, having received the teaching, you can do that anytime online. Her PayPal address is jetsumagift@gmail.com, and that's also in the chat. So you're welcome to check all of that out. If you have any questions for us anytime, you can just write to us at kpc@tara.org, and just put in the subject line kind of what your question's about, and it'll get directed to somebody who hopefully can give you the best answer. All of that being said, join us again when you can. We're so happy. We're just so happy to be with all of you. It's like having the biggest family and the most wonderful family in the world. So thank you. And until next time.